Salam and peace, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Real Diagnosis. I'm your host, Baer Ahmed. Today's show is about human rights. Particularly today, I wanted to delve into the personal experiences and the work of a person who has a firsthand look experience at human rights, who a former political prisoner. I'd like to welcome to the show Mohamed Soltan, who is a human rights advocate, a humanitarian, a former political prisoner, an Egyptian American. So please welcome to the show, Mohamed Soltan.
I'm going to be glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us on this show. We really wanted to kind of take a deep look at human rights and prisoner health. You're somebody who has a lot of experience with that. You've done a lot of work in this realm. And I'm not sure if many of our viewers know you've also been a political prisoner yourself in Egypt. And so what I wanted to kind of dive into is when we talk about human rights and the work that people are doing to advocate on behalf of people who have their rights being taken away from them and who are struggling with that. How do you introduce this subject? How would you introduce this to people? How do you begin the conversation?
I mean, I think the conversations around, we go about our regular day. When you talk about this time that we live in today, where you have a pandemic that's ensuing, across the world. You have many people feel, rightfully so, this sense of anxiety about, the uncertainty, the changes that they're undergoing in their day-to-day life. A lot of people, the age of my parents, the age of your parents, like they fear for their parents' health. They fear that any sort of pre-existing conditions would make them more prone to this. And so when you talk about right now and how people are thinking about their day-to-day life and they're re-examining as people sit in their homes for long periods of, long hours, and they're thinking about all of these things, and there are these sort of stressors. And so when people are feeling this, and you also add to that the tens of thousands of families, if not hundreds of thousands of families, whose loved ones are in prison, in conditions that can sort of exacerbate and expedite the sort of, process in which they could contract a virus, this virus or any other virus, in inhumane conditions. And then when you add to that a layer of personal stories that you hear and personal testimonies of people that have survived these prisons, and to sort of think how unimaginable it is to imagine someone's loved one, someone's parent. Like my dad, it's my dad's birthday today. It's his 61st birthday. My dad, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, classified him as a prisoner of opinion, as a political prisoner, and they demanded his release in 2019. My dad is spending this 7th birthday in prison in Egypt. It's the it's been 67 days that we haven't heard about my dad at all. We don't know where he is. We have no idea. So not is it just the stressors of everyday life, of just the changes that are happening, not just that the fear of literally waking up to a call about, friend or a father or a mother or whoever is in prison, that something might have happened to them, that they might have contracted. And having the sort of background and experience of having been in the same place, and then also not even knowing where your loved one is. This is not just an experience of, not just my experience, but the experience of tens of thousands of survivors, of families of political prisoners that are undergoing this every single day, in this sort of compounded, perpetual anxiety and stress that comes with the everyday life. In 2020, when just the world is sort of, seems like it's going up in flames. It's a lot, but it's and brings it back to the basics. Human beings should enjoy the most basic freedoms,
Right.
and that's a right that everybody, all people, deserve, and we should work towards that every single day. It's our duty as human beings, and it's our duty as Muslims, as as people of faith, all faiths, um, and
Right.
we should, and it's a responsibility. If I'd even go as far as saying it's an obligation for us to literally every day in our every single day in our life sort of have that sort of aspect or that sort of perspective, and some sort of contribution, to lifting injustice, to ensuring that individuals around the world are enjoy the most basic rights.
So, you mentioned a few things, and you mentioned your father spending his seventh birthday in prison, and for a time period, you were also in prison with him. You overlapped. You were a political prisoner. You were persecuted by the Egyptian government for essentially being somebody who was tweeting what was happening on an everyday basis when the revolution was happening during the Arab Spring, and so you were on the inside of this. And so what's really tough for people to maybe conceptualize or grasp is what does it even mean to be a political prisoner? The general understanding of prison is somebody commits a crime and they have to pay for it by going to prison. But this is a whole different kind of ball game. There are certain goals that regimes or parties or players have when they throw somebody in prison for having an opinion or for expressing the freedom of speech or something like that. So can you take us inside to the life of somebody who's a prisoner because of a prisoner of opinion, as you mentioned, or a political prisoner? How does it affect the psyche? What are some of the ways that people are trying to advocate for themselves on the inside, like you did? And what are some of the things that people like me who are on the outside and who maybe are sympathetic to the cause and want to help? What are some of the things that I could do?
Well, it's a multi-pronged, loaded
There's
question.
a lot in there. There's a lot in there. So
So let me try to unpack it. I think the um, Egypt's prisons, and those are the ones I spent 22 months in. They're some of the most notorious prisons in the world. They are underground dungeons, with no sunlight, overcrowded cells. Sometimes, I think I'm in this room, and this is my office. Uh, Probably 20 people. That was the cell with a sort of hole in the ground as a bathroom, where you literally have the prison standards is, basically like a hand and a fist is how much space you have on the ground, and in about 6 feet. And so you
wow,
literally have to sleep on your side straight and crisscrossing with somebody else.
wow,
And as you can imagine, spending literally 23 hours a day, they give you an hour of recess in the hallway of the underground dungeon. So,
wow,
no sunlight, no a lack of access to medical care. We have until now about 700 human rights organizations have documented about 700 cases of deaths of medical negligence, including the former Egyptian president, Mohamed Morsi, who literally died in the courtroom in a soundproof glass, what's it called,
age, yeah,
out of the courtroom, where he had a heart attack and they left him to die. And he had predicted that if he was not, if he was prevented from his getting his medication, that if he was not to get the health care that he needed, that he would die, and he did. You have other people, the head of the Egyptian medical syndicate, the former one, Dr. Arian, just died a few days ago. And you have these people that have pre-existing. So the most basic rights, even for prisoners, let alone a prisoner of opinion who should be treated a little bit better, is not granted. The conditions themselves without a pandemic are ones that are literally fertile ground for disease and for infections and for widespread virus, and the regime just allows it. One of the wardens of the Scorpion prison, which is one of the most, Human Rights Watch did an entire sort of profile of the prison. The warden literally says this prison was created so that you can go into that prison and leave in a coffin, Like, you don't come out of that prison unless in the coffin. And it's true. We're seeing this every single day, and there's nothing. So you already have these prisons that, in Egypt, that you have 60,000 political prisoners. I mean, I walked those halls of those underground dungeons. They're not places that are suitable for animals, let alone human beings, let alone politicians, doctors, lawyers, engineers, um, and activists, bloggers, journalists, literally people from all walks of life across a sort of age spectrum. And we we have that in Egypt. We've got, in Saudi Arabia, we've got thousands of political prisoners in Turkey and Iran and literally every Arab country, the UAE, every Arab country, every Muslim country, you have tons of people who are in prison for simply voicing their opinion. And that's not okay. It's not okay. It wasn't okay before the pandemic. It's more not okay after the pandemic.
Right.
And
what can be done about this? So how do you bring this to the level, to the consciousness of everyday people?
So honestly, the way I do this is I try to educate people. I do it through telling my story and the story of others, as I'm doing now. And I really appreciate, the sort of the time and the opportunity and the platform to be able to do this. It's that the 60,000 political prisoners are statistics in Egypt, but every single one of those is a father, is a brother, it's a mother, it's a sister. And shedding light on those stories, that when you put somebody in prison and it literally puts a pause on their life, and everything, their emotional growth, their intellectual growth, their physical growth or physical well-being is sort of threatened, and the psychological impact is just insane. I mean, I literally still wake up frantically in the middle of the night if my wife comes and if a door is slammed too hard, or if I hear shaking keys, and a lot of triggers. And I've been out of prison for 5.5 years. And so it doesn't even go away. And so sharing those stories, shedding light on the plight of those that are still there, and the impact. I think sharing those stories and reminding people that these authoritarian governments hope that these prisons are the sort of graveyard of the living. And we make sure that they're not forgotten, that we're shedding light on their stories, that they're not dead yet. And we try to do everything that we can by, calling our representatives, by tweeting, sharing, by posting, by educating ourselves, writing in every forum and in every network that we're in. Hey, did you see the story? Hey, did you hear about this? Here's what you can do. Here's a sign on. What's it called? Or the change.org,
Petitions.
like a petitions.
Right.
Here are, call your representatives, talk to someone influential, have, someone who's whatever, an influencer that or whatever, post about. All of these things helps sort of raise awareness about what's happening. It contributes a lot. And honestly, I'm literally a byproduct of that. I'm a byproduct of, my family and friends, including you, Ed, and so many people from around the world, literally not giving up hope that they can save me from prison. And so they did everything they can. Sometimes it was effective, sometimes it wasn't, but it wasn't about that. It was about doing everything that you can. It's about pressing every button on the board and seeing what works. But now through, we've sort of, after I was released from prison, we've tried to institutionalize this work. So, we founded the Freedom Initiative. Its logo is right here. And we've tried to sort of weed out a little bit of, what are the ineffective tools? What are the effective tools that can help people get out of prison? And we've been pretty successful on that. And so,
let's take a break here. And I want to talk more about the Freedom Initiative when we come back.
Okay, thank you.
So stay tuned.
Assalamu alaikum. Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Okay, and we are back. This is another episode of The Real Diagnosis. This episode is titled Human Rights and Hunger Strikes. We have a special guest today. We have Mr. Mohamed Soltan. He's the founder and director of the Freedom Initiative based out of DC, which is an advocacy group for human rights. Right before we went to break, we were talking about the Freedom Initiative, and essentially when you were released from prison after all of the work of so many different people involved, including the State Department and various NGOs, you decided you wanted to come back and institutionalize this work, in your words, that you wanted to make this kind of something that can look for all of the effective modes in terms of getting advocacy out there, of raising the awareness in a really effective manner. Can you talk to us a little more about some of the things that you found that have succeeded, some of the things that you think have not been so successful and maybe are inefficient? And even if you want to talk about some of the cases you guys have been involved in, because I know you guys are actively doing work.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I think the one thing that for sure doesn't work is apathy, is sort of just throwing your hands up and saying, this is a big problem and it's too big to solve. I don't know what to do. And, I'm a firm believer in sort of chipping away at big problems. And tackling it from different angles. So, and this is what we're trying to do at the Freedom Initiative. I think, the sort of like perfect is the enemy of good as well. So like just doing what we can, and it doesn't matter if we screw up here or mess up something here. We'll just keep trying it. We'll try it again, because at the end of the day, we don't have options. We've got family and friends and people we know and people we care about and issues we care about that we don't have any other choice but to sort of keep trying until it works. And so I think that sort of mindset and that sort of insistence on getting to your goal, like in everything else, like in sports, like in career, like in education, you're just sort of putting your mind to something and sort of trying to find out. When it comes down to, sort of the mechanisms and the technicalities, I think it takes a village. I think the combination of grassroots, and sort of community organizing, getting community members involved, grass tops, making sure that you have the right contacts, in the legislative branch, and in the executive branch to make sure that, you know, you're leveraging some of those contacts and some of those people and getting people in those places, not just seeing them as a monolith that they're all evil. And there are good people that just need to be educated. So raising awareness, educating them about what's happening, and giving them the tools, just like how you asked a little bit ago. You said, what can I do? What can people like me do? And it's the same thing. And so going to some of these people that are in important places, staffers, and not necessarily just going for the photo op with the congressman or the senator or the secretary or whatever, but just going to the people around them that do the day-to-day work, educating them on these issues, but also empowering them and telling them every action, small action that you can do can impact a lot of people. And then you sort of, you chip away at it little by little, and then you have a success story that people are invested in. And then you bring that success story in front of those people and you say, that person is alive because of your work. That person is free because of your work. And that's so gratifying. And it's giving people ownership in those successes, in those cases. And it makes it so that people, you know, in communities, in grassroots, and in grass tops, in some of these important offices, feel ownership in that success. And the natural inclination as a human being is to want to have more success and to feel more fulfilled and to feel good. And it just sort of becomes a sort of a snowball of goodness. And you know, I always say this, it's like, you don't, the way we quantify good and evil, you don't need the same amount of evil. You don't need the same amount of good to quash evil. You need a little bit of light to illuminate darkness. You need just a match in a dark room to light up the whole room.
Right.
So we don't need the hundreds of millions of dollars that, you know, these regimes do to try to whitewash their images from the crimes and to try to wash their hands away in arms sales, etc. You don't need, you know, to have lobbyists on your payroll and PR people and all of that. It just takes people that have the truth, that are advocating for good, for human rights, to just do the work.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all it is. It's just a movement.
Well, I think your story too is so crucial to this entire movement because, you know, when you were arrested, you're an American citizen. You're arrested in a country that's extremely low on the human rights index. Egypt is known for their human rights violations. And so it was easy, I think, for someone to become hopeless in the thought of, there's a dictator there. There was just a military coup. They just committed a massive massacre in Rabaa Square that, you know, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International covered in excruciating detail. We just came up on the anniversary. And so it was extremely important to watch someone like you, first of all, go under this incredible hunger strike that people could watch your body deteriorate. You'd show up to your court appearances and that people could notice that you were becoming less and less healthy. You were this young, otherwise healthy person. You were going on a hunger strike. So that attracted attention. And there was a lot of people working on this, and the United States government, the State Department. And so for you to finally be able to be released from prison and show up, I think it was at Dulles Airport is when you were kind of wheeled out. That was such a symbolic moment. And so when you talk about, you know, these successes and you want more successes, I think that's incredibly, incredibly important. And so my question to you is, you know, you've kind of went through this whole battle yourself. You've been in that position. There are clearly been some failures that you've come across. How do you, if somebody gets that feeling of hopelessness or apathy that we talked about, what are some of the things that you've kind of done with your team, with the work that you've kind of engaged on to combat that? What are some of the things that you've tapped into to kind of keep the work moving forward?
You know, as you were saying that, all I can think of was Mustafa Qasim. Mustafa Qasim was an Egyptian-American father from New York, auto parts dealer, and he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. He got picked up, and he was in the same prison as I, and he was the first case we worked on. Mustafa Qasim died earlier this year in prison on August 13th from a heart attack. And it was devastating. It was devastating because a week before we had gotten a call from the State Department saying he will be released soon.
Wow.
and his body just didn't make it. And it was the worst feeling, because I said, is it enough to call the family? Because I don't want to get their hopes up.
Right. Right.
They told me yes, and I did. And less than a week after, I had to call them and give them my condolences. And I think that was a very low point for me personally, and it was a low point for the entire team. And I just think necessity, man. I don't think I don't think we did anything so out of the ordinary. I just think that we go through these modes with these ups and downs and in the ebbs and flows, but it has just, I think, necessity. Necessity is the most important. We have to do what we just got to do what we have to do.
Right. And it also seems like the fact that Mustafa Qasim passed away so tragically in prison is something that I think would also motivate people to continue to work, because they don't want another incident like that, and also they don't want to forget his story.
Yeah.
They want to do it in his honor.
And that's exactly what his family told us. They said, you need to honor him by continuing to do this work. And that's exactly what we're doing.
That's incredible. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. We'll wrap up with Mohamed Soltan. We'll talk a little bit about some action items for all of our viewers to do immediately, something that you can get your hands involved in. So let's take a quick commercial break and we'll be back.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. Past campaigns covered a wide range of humanitarian concerns. Through Bosnia Task Force, imams and leaders of Chicago's Muslim community worked to ensure Bosnia became a top national issue. This led to life-saving American policies in Bosnia. A key accomplishment was helping to get rape declared a war crime. Initiatives also included Kosovo Task Force, Central African Republic Task Force, and Flint Coalition, which brought awareness to the water crisis affecting the people of Flint, Michigan. Highlights of our work include supporting Black Lives Matter, Parliament of the World Religions, addressing climate change.
So wasteful consumption starts the ruthless production, and that's where we need all the fossil fuel in the world.
And prominent media exposure.
This is Imam Malik Mujahid, President of Justice for All.
And I'm the Director of Outreach for Justice for All.
And that's why we need to go back to what worked.
Today we're demanding an apology from the CEO of Costco.
The Chinese crackdown on Uyghurs and other Turkic people has only gotten worse.
Current programs such as Burma Task Force advocate for the rights of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, internally displaced populations, and all those denied freedom of movement and at risk of starvation. Through this, we mobilized thousands of calls to elected representatives. This paved the way for the U.S. to increase funding for Rohingya refugees from $30 million to over $600 million. 2 of our documentaries were featured on international news outlets. The Rohingya People, a slow-burning genocide, on BBC World News, and Rohingya Refugees Tel Aviv Massacre was featured on CNN. We've organized rallies, UN mission visits, expanded presentations on campuses, promoted research and report writing, outreach to think tanks, media, and other influencers. Faith Coalition educates about the Rohingya genocide and crimes against humanity faced by ethnic groups in Burma. We've traveled to refugee camps, convened a meeting of Karen, Kachin, and Rohingya leaders, both to encourage cooperation and to guide them in congressional outreach. We organized Rohingya Advocacy Day. This led to over 100 participants visiting the offices of 60 U.S. senators and congressional representatives. Free Kashmir advocates for the people of Kashmir. Long-term goals include the call for self-determination, the end of the Indian military's occupation of the territory, and raising awareness of Kashmiri issues among the American people. After the August 5th reinvasion of Kashmir, we organized national protests in front of various Indian government buildings, partnered with Stand With Kashmir, and launched a petition condemning the Gates Foundation's decision to present Prime Minister Modi a humanitarian award. Save Uyghur informs Muslims and neighbors of other faiths about the ongoing cultural genocide of Uyghur Muslims and mobilizes public support. Our projects include boycotting Chinese products with our Fast from China campaign, pushing Bill S-178 in the Senate, and organizing a nationwide protest of Costco. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
And we are back with The Real Diagnosis. Today's episode is Human Rights and Hunger Strikes. We have a humanitarian, a human rights advocate, a former political prisoner, the founder of the Freedom Initiative, Mohamed Soltan, with us. I wanted to wrap up our final segment talking about, what are the next things people can do? And I think we touched on this earlier, but I also wanted to mention some of the events that I've seen the Freedom Initiative put on, and some of the things that I found that I've been able to personally attend that I found just so insightful. The experience was amazing. I saw one of the things was the Egypt Advocacy Day, where we literally were able to head out to DC, participate in this program that your organization put on, be educated by people who work in DC about how to approach the people who are in position, who are making decisions that can impact the lives of political prisoners and human rights causes all across the world. And so I wanted to just have you maybe touch on some of those things, some of those events, how people can get involved, and what you think somebody should do tomorrow or the day after. You're on mute, by the way. Let's.
That's got to happen at least once, and and so I think definitely not even tomorrow. Right now, I think go to the freedomI.org. That's thefreedomi.org, and we have a get involved section. You can put in your information, get involved with the Freedom Initiative, and see what our upcoming events are going to be. I think the second thing, definitely educate yourself about what's happening, not just in Egypt, not just in Saudi or in the UAE or in Turkey or in Iran. Just and then third, I think find a political prisoner, whether they're known or unknown, and champion their cause. I think we get so attached to personal stories because as human beings, we're on this earth to sort of get to know one another, and just there's so many common denominators between us, and we'll find some sort of relatable thing. Find a person that you find their story compelling and take that case on. These personal stories are so important because it reverses exactly what these authoritarian regimes want to do, is sort of reduce every person to a statistic. And so by educating yourself about a prisoner and about their family and about, how long they've been in prison and their fight for their freedom, you're humanizing them. So you're sort of undoing and you're chipping away at this narrative. So pick a prisoner, advocate for them, write to your congressmen, your senators, your parliament members, write to representatives. Reach out. Every person knows someone. If you've got a good following on social media, or if you know someone that does, do that. Make a TikTok video, do an Instagram story, do a tweet, share something on whatever it is. Share stories with other people. Tell your friends, hey, did you hear about this person? Do a tweet a day or a post every week. But most importantly, I think keep going. Don't give up hope. And so we humanize these stories, but our asks also got to be realistic. So when we reach out to our congressmen, our senators, our representatives, we ask them, we say, raise this issue, and don't get sort of hopeless or apathetic about when you don't get a response. Keep going, keep hitting that call button, keep sending emails, keep doing these petitions. One thing after the another sort of snowballs. We have our advocacy days that hopefully will continue after Corona. Get involved, come through to DC, see how sort of just how everything is made and how things work. Get involved. We're going to have some activities coming up soon in the local, in your locale. Hopefully, you'll find something nearby. You can sort of get involved with people and sort of with your local government, your local representatives. I think is very, very important. And it's just this outward, inward sort of work. You educate people in power, and you educate those that, in the grassroots and in the community. And when you do that enough and you keep doing it persistently, you get there.
Yeah, I think something also that the Freedom Initiative does that I found incredibly impactful was the way that they're educating people. So you mentioned, being realistic and having asks and approaching these people who are in positions of power, like congressmen or representatives and senators. I remember one of the Egypt advocacy days, they were highlighting how much money goes to the Egyptian government from the United States. Okay, well, that suddenly becomes relevant for that congressman and that senator. Also, how many people are in the prisons right now. And then you also would have people who were in Egypt at the time who were seeking asylum or there on DC, on Capitol Hill, which is incredibly powerful. So what are some good sources that you use or that other people use in terms of educating themselves?
I think, the main human rights organizations, we've got some sources on our website, thefreedomeye.org. I think some of our partner organizations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Project on Middle East Democracy, Tahrir Institute for Middle Eastern Policy. There's quite a few, Committee for Justice, Cairo Institute, Egyptian Human Rights Forum, some of the Saudi cases too, because now we work on Saudi cases as well. There's a lot of organizations that work on these issues that have very, very good resources. Funny enough, some of the State Department's own democracy, rights, and labor yearly reports are very, very educational. They just don't do anything about them, or they try, but some of them are because they rely heavily on the NGOs to provide them with information, and then they supplement them with their own but the information is out there. I think, some of the congressional reports as well are very, very insightful. And Euromed organization, there's just a lot. There's if you look up Egypt political prisoners on Google, you will find a ton of resources. It's I think there's been a lot of research done. I think there hasn't been enough action to sort of build on the research that's being done. So I don't think anyone's going to have a hard time finding information, credible information about that.
So I think our viewers, a great action item is to familiarize themselves with all of these resources and this information, and then elevate that to just the level of conversation and consciousness, because people have to care to do something about it and for things to change. And I think if people know about it, they will care, just based on the fact that we're talking about human rights and human beings. I want to thank my guest, Mohamed Soltan. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been an incredible session. I hope to have you on in the future.
Yes.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
That was the episode of The Real Diagnosis, Human Rights and Hunger Strike. You can check us out on muslimnetwork.tv. Tune in next week as we tackle another issue. Thank you, everyone. Salam and peace.